Hello, this is Edward Gray again, mondays known as Jared Busby, talking about power generation, talking about practicing to develop power when throwing shots in the SCA. The first thing I want to say, and Duke Paula Bellatrix says this all the time because it's fundamental to fighting, is that when you're practicing, you want to practice motions large, much larger than you'll practice them or execute them in an actual fight. For example, I presume everybody watching this has seen a karate movie of some kind. And instead of karate movie, they start in a horse stance, they come to a fighting stance, and the first thing they do is they put their hand on their hip, they step forward, and they punch. They'll throw a ki in there to really make sure they're involved, right? And so they come through and they do this punch. And then those of us of a certain generation remember Bruce Lee and his infamous 1-inch punch, right? Where he would have his palm out here and go bang, right? And that punch was supposed to have all the energy that this did. I realize I should have set this up only slightly differently, but to demonstrate, right? That's a punch, right? That's the same punch. The way you practice the latter is the former. To make this short, quick motion land involves all the body mechanics and muscle timing associated with this punch, and simply has less room in which to accelerate and develop that power. Any martial art practitioner will tell you that. Anybody who knows how to fight, whether it's boxing, whether it's karate, understands that. These punches, these wind-ups, the reason we're doing them big is not to be showy. The reason we're doing these big is to train your foot, train your knee, train the muscles that connect the two and the tendons that connect them to your hip, to your core, to sort out the sequence and timing, how weight is transferred from one to the other, so that you can develop and build upon the last motion to develop a fully formed punch. Because every point of connection, all the individual vertebrae in between, the hip, the knee, the ankle, these are all springs. I'm a mechanical engineer, so when I think of a spring, I want you to think of analogs. I want you to think of a slinky, which is a soft spring. You push it, it moves. Think of a car spring. You got to be heavy as a car to make the car spring move, right? So there's stiff springs and there's soft springs. The key is to make these hard springs when you're transmitting power through them, and then soften them after the force has gone through so they can move and develop your body. So this transmission, if you have a stiff car spring, right, you push on that, it moves. The whole thing goes, right? There's no flexure of the spring. The spring doesn't give up force. It doesn't bleed power from the shot. You can also think about this transmission of force, this continuity of energy. Everybody's seen a figure skater, and they're making their spins. They put their arms in, so they're really stiff, small moment of inertia, so they spin real fast. They stick their arms out, what happens? They bleed all that power out really quickly and slow down. So if I am trying to develop and transmit power, if my arm is close to my body, it transmits the power from my hip. My arm is way over here, it bleeds power because these joints are not well connected. So there's a sequence and timing keeping these two together and then extending to contact so that you transmit the force generated in the foot, through the leg, into the hip, through the core, shoulder, and then transmit it through the arm, as opposed to bleeding all that energy off into la-la land because you were not prepared to deliver that. Now, there are many ways to develop power. In my prior video, I talked about linear speed, how fast do I throw in a straight line, and I talked about rotational speed, how fast do I spin, okay? You can develop speed either way. This is a preference thing. This is a matter of what you happen to have available to you at a given moment. You need to learn that these things are additive. If my hand accelerates out and my sword spins, the sword tip is moving forward as fast as my hand moves forward, and it's rotating at the same time, so those speeds add to each other to give you a net result at contact. So you can use these individually or in combination to develop sufficient power for your opponent to accept the shot. To quickly review and point you to other resources, there are many people smarter than I that know how to do this, right? Go through, look at a lot of different sources. Paul Bellatrix has got a big shiny book out, 443 pages, I think, right? A lot of good information there. Duke Sean of Tarragon has talked about this for ages. He's got a bunch of videos out there for lots of different things. I'm going to quickly review a couple points and then give you some other thoughts to think about from my perspective. Duke Sean tends to be relatively linear in his body motion. Going forward, I will talk about lateral footwork here momentarily, but that is irrelevant to developing the power. The lateral placement positions you relative to their guard and defense. It gives you better shot selection, does not develop more power. I will also talk about rotating the hips and counter-rotating the hips. Sean talks a lot about get the body motion either forward or rotate, and then make the sword rotate to develop that clean shot. So you can think about doing that from standing, you can think about doing that from stepping. It is more apparent in the step, just as this punch is more apparent if you step with it. The hip focus should be right here. If I take a step, my mass moves with that. So, talking about power, when my hip moves, right here, look at me. What moves with that? Well, the knee to the shoulder. That's 80% of my mass. I've been collecting a couple pounds, so I'm at 220 these days, so 80% of 220 is in motion anytime I rotate my hips. Anytime I step forward or backwards, I have roughly 180 pounds moving around, 176 pounds moving around, providing momentum, providing mass, providing force to transfer into this stick that's going to hit somebody. Now I can just shoulder a shot where I'm using my upper body here and trying to put that in there. You do that very long, you're going to get tired really quick. And you're going to have to be concerned about your longevity in this sport. Understand that you can build muscle. Building tendon strength is tough. A number of Eastern martial arts schools do talk about it, but you can build muscle strength in 1 to 3 months. you build tendon strength over 9 months or more. That's a big lag there, and the opportunity to develop enough strength to destroy your tendons. So be careful. So here, watch Sean in terms of how he throws a flat snap. Has excellent videos on that topic. So definitely see do Sean's videos about throwing a flat snap. They're excellent, and I want to spend a little time reviewing them myself and to consider a couple of changes that I might make. But when I'm trying to develop power, what I'm going to show you is how to develop power, how to develop more power. You hopefully get to a point where you don't need all the power that you can develop, but the key is to be able to develop more if you find you need it, right? You threw a shot, your opponent did not take it for whatever reason. How do you develop more? Okay, until they say good. And then you're golden and you go on and throw the next one. The first thing I want to talk about as I go into that is footwork, foot placement. If you were the bad guy, sorry, it's your turn. The other guy on the field is always the bad guy. The guy talking is the good guy. This sword is in line between you and myself. Okay? I never want to be square to you because I present a large target. I never want to be directly in line with you because my ability to put lateral content into a strike doesn't exist. I can thrust, I can advance front to back, but I have to step offline to push sideways. So this is Newton, right? For every force, there's an equal opposite reaction. This is also a graph paper, XY coordinates, right? A graph, up, down, left, right. If I want to be able to push up and left, right, my footwork has to have a little left, right, and a little up, down in it. So this is front, back, left, right. If my footwork is here, my ability to go forward is compromised. My ability to go backward is compromised. If my footwork is linear, my ability to go sideways is compromised. So a little bit of a diagonal stance gives you both opportunities. Whole lots of schools on exactly if you want your feet in line, if you want them kicked off at an angle a little bit, don't really care. What I want to be sure that you pay attention to is the alignment between the knee and the foot. I will demonstrate that simply by asking you to broaden your stance out a little wider than you would. I want you to keep your feet planted on the ground. I want you to rotate. I want you to feel the twist that you impart in your knees and understand that if you twist any further, you can blow your knees out. This should be self-explanatory when you try this exercise lightly. This is what I want you to not do with force and 30, 50 pounds of armor on, because when you do this at speed, you will wreck your knee. So if you get up on your feet nice and light and you rotate, my knees and my feet go in the same direction. I'm not able to over torque my knee if I allow my toes and my knees to go together. If I plant one and then twist, that's when I blow into the joint. Okay? So again, not square, not on line, 45, 30, 60 degrees, somewhere in there is fine. So the fella's now the bad guy, you're no longer the bad guy. I don't care if your shield side foot is forward or back. I really don't. But I'm going to start with the shield leg forward. I'm going to take a step and fire. Notice that as I rotate my body, rotate my weight, my feet rotate with them. Okay, so again, I maintain that alignment so don't blow my knee. This is simply a flat rotation. I'm holding the sword on my shoulder, I'm stepping, I'm rotating, I'm extending across my body. That is a typical strike angle. I can talk about variations in real shortly. If you want more power, the key is tightening up the sequence. You can consider weight drops as well as rotations, right? This first step simply had a rotation. If I want more, that drop was an additional motion. The rotation was exactly the same motion. So velocity is additive. Acceleration is additive. I simply added another vector to that. The other way to do this is to make the stick go faster or use a heavier stick. If you want to make the stick go faster, you have to turn faster. To turn faster, you want to make sure that your core is nice and tight, like that figure skater I was just talking about. Because if you go big and wide, your body's resistance to rotation goes up. This is called inertia. The bigger you are, the larger your rotational inertia is. The more power is required to rotate you. The smaller you are, the less your inertia is, the less power is required to rotate you. So your angular velocity can be increased, and then you simply extend the sword length at the end of that, and now you have that high velocity, angular velocity, in this long length. That's just a nutshell of the physics involved. So I needed a moment to think about where I was going next with this. So depending upon where you are in your current progression, you want to go different places next. So if you're new to this and trying to figure out how to develop that first flat snap that really works for you, and realize I was a slow student, it was 8 years before I liked my flat snap, before I really liked it. The first thing that's important is not this sword. I don't really care about this sword. The first thing that's important is to get your body moving, to get the power transfer from your body's mass and momentum to the stick. Whether a sword helps you do that or not, I don't care. Right now, what I want you to do is learn to make that rotation. And maybe you know boxing, right? You're doing that jab, right? Maybe that is a way that communicates you. Maybe you've done a shot put before from track and field. That's the same motion. Perhaps you've done karate and done a roundhouse kick. Same motion, just rotate the upper body instead of the lower body. But you need to find a way to connect to the kinematics of the motion. You need to find a way to get your body moving with the intent to hit the target. Once you've got that general momentum transfer, we can now start talking about efficiencies of the strike. We can start talking about better foot placement. We can talk about targeting. We can talk about different ways to throw this. So once you are generally moving in a reasonable fashion, we can start talking about efficiently throwing the shot. The first thing I want to say is keep your body upright. Because at the end of this shot, I'm going to want to do something else. Remember I talked about inertia a second ago? About being overbalanced? If your arms are wide, your ability to rotate is reduced. Your elbows are in, my ability to rotate is increased. If I'm bent forward, all my weight is counterbalanced forward. I've got a lot of resistance to correcting that. If I'm trying to turn from here, so just do this at home. Flop your body forward and spin left to right. Put your hip under your head and spin left to right. The latter is far easier. So if I'm generally balanced when I'm fighting, and I've thrown a shot and want to do something else because my opponent is threatening me, it behooves me not to be in a position from which I need to first recover before I can respond to their threat. Okay? So you want to be generally upright. Excellent. You want your eyes focused at your opponent so you can see them. So you can see what they're about to do to you. So that you can see where the threat is. So you can keep that awareness of the fight. As opposed to, there's their leg. I know where their leg is. I bet I can hit it. And my head's open. That's no benefit. I'm going to strike the leg. I'm going to strike the leg. And my eyes are on their eyes so that I can pay attention to their sword that wants to hit me in the noggin. Okay. Once we have been able to place a telling blow into a flat snap, we should then think about where to place the flat snap. Some viable places are the side of my temple. Generally, the flat across, the arm is obstructed by a shield, but if they happen to have a great weapon, you can take the arm, or you can throw down into the leg. All right. I can throw up, I can throw middle, I can throw down. Okay. Variations. Well, I can be in range and throw. I can be out of range, step forward and throw. I can throw this at maximum range. I can throw this in middle range. We typically call that C and B. I can throw this in short range, A. I can throw that from point nothing. That requires working with a Pell. So why am I working with a Pell, you may ask? Pell gives me feedback. So you notice when I hit it with a telling blow, it responds, it moves. If I hit it with the tip and it bounces off, that tells me something too. It tells me the power isn't going into the shot. If I want to deliver power into this shot, my sword has to be perpendicular to the target, and the point of contact has to be where I am focusing all this energy and momentum that I've developed by turning and rotating and stepping forward. It has to be the same location. If I'm focused that energy in the sword tip over here, and my sword makes contact at a shorter range, the tip will carry over and roll around and not deliver all that energy into the target. If I focus the shot here and make contact the tip, it push this way, and that power doesn't go in. So the difference between hitting at the very end of your sword versus hitting with a prime target takes some practice. You have to get in front of the Pell, you have to hit it, and you have to feel whether or not that power goes in. If it bounces around, doesn't go in, something's wrong. Slow down, back up. This comes back to how should I approach the Pell? How hard, how fast should I target this? Duke Sean again talks a lot about using Pells slowly, lightly. Working on your form. Okay? That is an excellent use of this material. It provides your body, your mind, your neural network, the connections to do this. The point of practicing on this Pell is to develop the neural connections so that when you're in a fight and you got to do it once right, you got the backing of thousands of times of having done it right, that your body knows instinctively how to do it. But it only knows that through repetition. Mastery comes after I'm doing it 2 to 10 million times, right? A lot of times. 2,000, 10,000 hours, right? Regardless of field. It's a lot of practice, a lot of Pellwork. But you go slow to go fast. You do this slowly with precision so that your body knows precisely how to do it, the timing involved, so that when you're called upon it, there's no internal resistance to that activity. Just doing it. I find if you don't know how to throw this shot properly yet, the Pell will give you some feedback. It will bounce around, the energy won't go in. You should be listening for that. So, Havek, right, is furious with the way people use Pells because people do bad Pell work forever and ever and train themselves to do bad Pell work, right? Practice is about doing a thing over and over again to train your body how to do it. If you're executing a technique improperly and repeating that 1,000 times, you're training your body to do it wrong 1,000 times. So what you want is you want regular feedback. You want to find a night, you want to find somebody who knows what they're doing to review you doing this Pell drill, this thing you practice at home. You want to take it to practice and demonstrate what you're doing a couple times to make sure he says, yeah, you're doing that right, or let me tweak you here or there, right? So that you go home and you make those little modifications and do it better until you are doing it flawlessly, okay? But how do you know that you're doing it right if you're new to this? Well, what I suggest doing is you do it slow. And you speed it up a little bit. And you speed it up a little bit. And you speed it up a little bit. And if you lose balance at some point in this exercise, oh, my weight's outside the step. I'm not pushing into it. This doesn't feel right. Let me slow down, right? Okay, what happened? My weight got outside my foot placement. Either I need to put my foot a little wider so that my weight can stay inside that foot placement, or I need to lean forward just a little bit to stay inside that foot placement. A or B. But if you go from slow, bring the speed up, bring the power up, see if you get to full power without loss of balance or precision. If you can't, at whatever point this fails, stop, evaluate, modify, try again. But you should be able to do this at speed and power, well balanced. At the end of it, your foot position should be proper relative to the target. Your foot placement should be roughly shoulder width apart. Your head should be vertical, so either truly vertical or slightly inclined towards the target is what I prefer. There's some people that will make some exceptions to this. As a rule of thumb, vertical, slightly in. What you don't want to do is be throwing a shot and leaning away from it. That will bleed power like nobody's business and leave you open to counterattack because your guard won't be where you expect it. Okay? So I've talked about using a Pell as a feedback tool to ensure that the practice you're doing is proper. I've talked about finding some other expert to review what you're doing to ensure that you're doing it properly before you do it 10,000 times. But you want to keep working to make it better and smoother. I've also talked about variations of the flat snap and range. Let's talk about variations of flat snap and angle. Okay? So we pan to the wall here that are a bunch of shields, right? They all have shapes. Some are round, some are flat. You want to strike parallel to those edges to make it more difficult for your opponent to block. You do not want to strike through those edges because you're striking immediately into their defense. They don't have to move their shield at all to block you. So sometimes it is appropriate to, instead of throwing a flat snap in flat, to either drop the tip or raise the tip to meet defeat the guard presented to you. Okay? Now, if I'm at extreme range, I change the angle, I don't hit the target. So realize by changing the angle, I shorten my range somewhat. So I have to get a little closer to make that happen. But if I want to drop the tip, it is the same shot, same location, except my hand simply goes up. And I am loosely controlling the sword as opposed to firmly death gripping it. Okay? And I am hitting that edge and bouncing off of it. Those are angle changes that you can practice with your pellet anytime. A thing to note about these, I'm going to go there in just 1 second. So this is power, this is developing power at different ranges, developing power at different angles, changing the speed at which you work to ensure that you are balanced throughout the exercise, make sure that your footwork has been regathered so that you can do the next thing in the fight. At this point, Duke of Vec has a video out there that is awesome about what you do next. Yes, I delivered the shot, but let me consider my recovery, because remember, I'm in a fight and somebody else is trying to hit me right now. Right? So I've made a strike, I've extended to target, I have landed a blow that may not have injured my opponent, you may have blocked it, you may have killed him, but he may be in the process of killing you too, right? So the question is, where do you recover from here? I can bring this back, recognize if I do so, this is all open. Or I can recover to here, make the block and fire into the opening. I can then choose to make that block and the like. Vec goes into this in great detail, but the point is, the fight isn't over simply because you've struck. Your opponent is is at least as good as you are, or you should be training for an opponent that is at least as good as you are, if not better. You want to beat people who are better than you are. So after you've made your attack, you recover. When you wind up, regather your sword to make the next strike, you want to come through their most likely shot angles, the shot lines. I want to stop here and go into a new topic.